My name is Nick Gasky. I'm one of the architects on the team here at Kaleido. I've been with the company for about 6 years, so seen the evolution of our product, but also the broader Web3 landscape. So happy to share some of my reflections, but we're going to spend the majority of the call and the webinar today kind of focusing on high level, the new generation of the Kaleido stack. And as a precursor, we're not going to go too deep into any specific feature. Think of this as sort of a preliminary kickoff to a broader set of webinars where we'll ultimately get more technical and esoteric and sophisticated and cater towards specific modules of your application and of your stack. So I won't go ad nauseum with slides, but I'd like to create a little bit of context for the folks that have joined today. Just one brief statement on the company, on Kaleido. This is really our ethos right here. So focusing on Web3 and digital assets, for the enterprise space. We pride ourselves on dealing with very bleeding edge and very sophisticated technologies, but not just providing access to them, providing an easy button on top of really, really complicated sort of programming interfaces. So you'll notice that as we're doing all of our CRUD operations, create, update, delete, and as we're talking to smart contracts, or as we're configuring policies, or even dealing with an application, there's a really, really simple consumable API surface that's accessible for developers of all shapes and sizes. And that's something I get really passionate and excited about, because it means that when we talk to clients and when I demo this stuff for you, you can look at it through the lens of, this is what I need my business to accomplish. This is the value I want to add to my users. This is the friction I want to remove, versus, sort of this turning into, an academic lecture right here where I'm trying to teach you about the nuances of, how HSM integrations work, or, how metadata modeling for NFT work. Last statement I mentioned already, built for the enterprise. So all of the required HADR compliance features and sort of enterprise integrations to your backend, those all exist in the stack. We work with industries of all shapes and sizes. The platform is agnostic to a use case, a user base, an industry, and we've had great success sort of spanning the gamut, across retail and entertainment, across supply chain, financial services, you name it. So just a few logos to look at, and then sort of a more granular look at a few consortia that are running on the platform, and a few specific retail and entertainment projects right here. The important thing, right, I just mentioned it, but like the ease of use, but also the comprehensive access to the portfolio of products and services inside of the stack really makes Kaleido a one-stop shop. So it's a really fun playground. It's a really fun sort of development suite, right, where you don't need to start stitching together disparate APIs or going to X number of different vendors. We seek to have the fat part of the Venn diagram in terms of the functionality and APIs that you need. A bit more tactical here of like why use Kaleido? What do we do, right, beyond just that mission statement? We are very big fans of open source, right? So all of the node clients that we run, you can see those logos there: Besu, Fabric, Quorum. We're the seed donators of the Hyperledger Firefly project, which has grown into one of the fastest growing code bases in the Firefly community. We'll definitely take a look at that today. And our team sits on the board of Hyperledger, and we have maintainers on the Besu team. We're not afraid of the bleeding edge stuff, as I mentioned. So things like decentralized identity, things like zero knowledge proofs, and scaling solutions, rollups, etc. We're eager to take those on and have the team members and subject matter expertise to sort of get the first iterations of those out into the wild. Pressing through here again, work with all shapes and sizes of industries, regulated, non-regulated. And you can see that we play in the government space, we play in the behind the scenes of banking space, right, with Swift. Also the educational space, where a number of really, really high profile universities actually use the Kaleido stack as their sort of educational sounding board and first experience to in a non-intimidating fashion familiarize their different cohorts with Web3 and some of the constructs. And then we've partnered with a lot of the really important players in the space. So enterprise partners with both Polygon and Avalanche. So work going on with, supernets and subnets, respectively. Also with, certain other projects that they have, like Polygon ID, for example, in the verified credential space. The analogy that I often use when you try to think about Kaleido, it's not a blockchain as a service company. That's one small veneer, one small piece of what we have. It's really more analogous to a cloud services company, right? So think AWS or think Azure, where you're buying compute, you're buying storage, you're buying API services, you're buying key integrations, et cetera. All of those are available in the stack right here. So it turns into almost like an a la carte menu, right? Where if you need certain features, just bolt them on into your experience. And then what you'll see today is everything's kind of encapsulated within the asset platform experience. You can extend that and get some fresh cracked pepper on your entree, right? To use a metaphor there. But it's a really comprehensive, predefined meal or predefined dish. So really, really powerful. I'll skip through the slides. We're really flexible, on different sort of deployment orchestrations. So, even if you have the most austere tenancy requirements, we can, provide all of the functionality, as dedicated software. If you're comfortable with cloud services and just, SaaS, general SaaS, we support AWS and Azure, both in a cross-cloud and cross-region capacity. So you get to, sort of take whatever you need. What cloud do you need? What protocol do you need? What integrations do you need? There's no, black box, or there's no certain direction that once you take it, you're sort of pigeonholed into that. Last slide, I think. One of the last slides. So this is probably the most important picture as a table setter for the demo today. This just gives you the logical layer cake view of the holistic Kaleido stack. So at the bottom, this is representative of the chain connectivity that Kaleido can support. And I'll mention again, it's not you get one type of blockchain or you get one protocol. Any chain that we can support will be abstracted via the API surface we're going to start talking about. So if you are early in a project, or you're starting to think about cross-chain interoperability and swaps, for example, you can create hooks into those different ecosystems. So this is where Kaleido started: private consortia blockchains. So your Fabrics, your Go Ethereums, Quorums, Besus, et cetera, in a very firewalled setting. We do support those app chain constructs that we mentioned. So the Polygons of the world can also work with clients to create what we'll call a custom side chain that can have the characteristics that your business needs. Maybe open or lightly gated RPC access with no gas fees. Typically, it's the no gas fee that's sort of attractive, and then all the way to the hooks in the public chains. And we can support connectivity to any EVM compatible chain. And there's a lot of work going on within Kaleido and within the open source community as well to support different connector models, UTXO, for example. The middle, again, we'll get into the demo here in just a second. The middle portion is really important. This is not a blockchain. It's logically positioned in this stack because it is middleware. And this is the orchestration engine. This is the brain that sort of gets your transactions into the blockchain, gets your events out of the blockchain, and moves horizontally for you to integrate with your backend systems, things like key management systems or SSO, OAuth, et cetera. Really, really powerful piece of open source technology, well over 1 million lines of code, and has some absolutely fascinating features. One, for example, which you'll see today, called EVM Connect, meaning just chuck a piece of Solidity code into the system, bunch of different ways to do that, and you get open APIs out the other side. So just another example of accelerating development for all shapes and sizes of Web3 programmers. And then what we've done is we've put some accelerators on top of it. We put some dedicated modules around digital assets, around NFTs, and around multi-party workflows. And we'll spend a tiny bit of time on this consortia piece, but as I mentioned, we're going to do subsequent webinars, and we're really going to take you through like examples of how a lot of these real world applications and workflows and privacy considerations all sort of manifest together. I think that'll probably be it. We'll touch on key management and policy stuff like super lightly today, but I'll disperse with the slides for now and just jump into the demo. I'm sort of monitoring the chat, but maybe Madison or Kevin or any other folks, if there's a an important question or an urgent question, please jump in and let me know. Okay, so this is the logical view of the asset platform right here. This sort of gives you the 6 core modules that exist inside of inside of that top portion of the stack. Very, very self-explanatory. I'll do the 101 walkthrough of them, and then we'll click through on a few of them. Landing zone for your business IP, for your logic right here. You'll see some sort of templates and Lego building blocks where we can make that even easier beyond just upload, get your API. Namespaces, this is where you do your work. This is where your APIs will live. This is where your event integrations will live. So this just requires 2 things. It requires a pointer to a blockchain, public or private, and it requires a pointer to an IPFS cluster, public or private. This requirement exists here because we have an out-of-the-box sort of paradigm to push metadata to IPFS when you're using NFTs.
Hey, Nick, if I can hop in for a sec, I think you're not sharing here.
Oh, no. Oh, I'm so sorry.
All good.
Thanks for hopping in.
No problem.
Yeah, do it sooner next time. Kidding. Yeah, okay, so hopefully folks heard that. Landing zone for your business logic right here has a bunch of other really cool features. We'll decompose those shortly. The namespace, again, this is where your APIs live, right? This is where your custom subscriptions and integrations live. Point it to a blockchain, point it to a public or private IPFS. Wallets, this is where you'll start seeing the real value of the platform, like well beyond just a lot of those easy buttons. Think about a landing zone for any type of key management that you want to, right? Third-party custody, server-side custody on Kaleido, right? Custom integrations to your own backend or an HSM. And your wallet landing zone, just like your business logic or smart contract landing zone, will propagate into any namespace that you want, right? So you have full autonomy. You have, full direction, right? Over, I want to use this smart contract, right, for this project in this namespace right here. I want to use this key orchestration for, this use case and this namespace over here. So, as much overlap or, lack of overlap as you want. NFTs, this will be a demo in and of itself. We'll probably do 5 minutes on this today, but this is an accelerator for, creating, whatever type of NFT that you want, right? What it provides you with is a really elegant, simple surface for uploading, updating, customizing the DNA of the NFT, right? The metadata, the structure of that object right there. So we'll take a quick look at that, but we won't get too exotic inside of this feature. And then blockchains right here, again, the connecting piece is really simple. If you're talking to Kaleido, it'll auto detect everything you have under the covers. If you're talking to a public chain, just give it the endpoint, give it the chain ID, similar to IPFS. So let's start jumping into these and we'll do some cool stuff today. And again, any questions, there is no such thing as a bad question. Throw them in there. We're here to help, or if you want to ping us after the fact, we'll give you ways to get in touch with us. So now we're into the business logic engine right here. And we can see, a dashboard of what I've done in the past, right? But we can also see sort of 2 core, operations, right? I can create builds and I can do stuff with those builds, right? So let's get some source code into the system. Let's see how that works right here. We can see, customize directory structure. That's often really convenient to, compartmentalize and park your code into, different logical identifiers. First thing that's, really obvious is that we don't even make you write any code to do a lot of the things on Kaleido, right? We have a bunch of, pre-baked templates that are derived from OpenZeppelin, battle hardened, tested out in the wild, right? And we'll continue to extend these over time. So you'll probably see a 1400 variant. You'll probably see something with 4337 in account abstraction. Probably see stuff around, other financial instrument paradigms. So, these are the ones, the very vanilla, very hard ones that you get out of the box, but also ones that, have a ton of functionality and, utility out there in, both private chains and public chains. So we'll go through like a, just a baby example of, doing a 721 and customizing it a little bit. So I'm gonna name it Nick right here because I don't think anyone's chosen that name. we can start doing what we want with this NFT, right? I want it to auto increment the indexes, right? So I don't have to specify those. I'd like it to be burnable, right? As the deployer or the owner of that token. I'd like it to be pausable, right? I'd like it to have URI storage. And you can see that, the source code, right, will auto-populate right here. And if you're new to the space, right, if this kind of, syntax is not comfortable, not familiar, as a developer, this is probably the best utility that, I can guide you towards, and that I would imagine, other folks like in the space would guide you towards too, right? Once you get a bit more comfortable and sophisticated, there's other, sort of libraries and, testing tools you can use. But this is really nice. If you want to try to add a new function or extend the contract, right? Remix will auto lint it, compile it for you, and kind of give you that sanity check, whether that code's going to actually work, whether that function's truly invocable. So you can do that, right? And then once you have your source code hardened, and quite frankly, I think a lot of folks already have their source code hardened, you can give it to us however you want, right? So maybe you have a private GitHub. You can pass the bearer token in and upload it that way. You can also sort of start writing bash scripts and cloud jobs, right, to push up, a .sol file or a combination of the ABI and the bytecode. So any different sort of approach that you want right there is available in the platform. So click next right here. Again, I can start creating custom names for the actions. I'm going to skip that, and I'm going to just, pick one of these existing folders and park it in here. I don't know. I'll put it in Bob. He's one of my colleagues. So go ahead and create that right there. And what happens behind the scenes is that we're going to run a Lambda function right up in the cloud, and we're going to compile this for you, right? So if we click on this right here, we're going to see, well, it went so fast I couldn't even show you. The status will go from pending, right? And it'll go to, succeeded if, you provide good source code in the system. The more dependencies, right, that you have, the more nested, sort of modules, right, that you're trying to speak into the contract, maybe the longer it will take right there. So that's simple to kind of use the GUI and to get any type of source code you want, park it in any directory you want. And now is probably a good time to open up the API surface a little bit. So again, we're not going to go like pretend everyone's, a full stack developer on this call, but I think it's worth pointing out that, again, I'll reiterate, every button that you can click, and this will always be the case, right? If you can ever click a button on Kaleido, there will be an API for it. So, you start thinking about, hey, we have a new requirement, and we'll get into this with NFTs too, but, as new, business logic comes into your system, as, new assets go into your CRM, or your backend systems, and you maybe want to make a really minute modification to the source code, or you've completely automated the updating of your source code, and then you need to push it to the system. You just start using this API surface right here, right? And you use the logical route, right? Builds right here would make sense to sort of push that up, and then you have actions where you can start doing stuff with that source code. And this API surface is incredibly expansive. I'll come back to it shortly, but it not only gives you the asset platform, but it gives you Firefly as well. Okay, so we've successfully compiled this right here, and now we'd like to do something with it, right? I think the next logical step would be to deploy the smart contract, right? So move this zoom bar. So we see that we have like kind of the right in your face deploy option. That's the one that makes sense. But there's a lot of other options too, right? That sort of might make sense after the fact to do. Maybe I want to, just get that open API interface, right? Or maybe I don't care about it, right? I don't need open APIs for this smart contract. I want to use this as the, smart contract management engine, and then I want to speak, my classic JSON RPC to the node. No problem. Okay. Maybe I want, if it is a 20 or an 1155 or 721 or, one of those token constructs that Firefly supports. Maybe I'd like everything indexed, right? We call that a token pool. Maybe there's certain functions on the smart contract that I want to look into a bit more deeply, right? And so on and on and on, right? Maybe it was an upgradable smart contract and I need to update that endpoint. Maybe I just, didn't have a good go at this one and I need to delete the build, right? So all of those things, and again, all modifiable right here. So let me make sure I get this right. This needs to be the right namespace, and this needs to be the right wallet right here. So namespace 1 and the wallet 1. And under the covers, this hook right here, we'll look at the connections piece, but this is pointing to a private Besu chain. And one nice feature, right, which should be pretty apparent here, is that you get a convenience feature from the platform if you're speaking to a chain that has gas enabled. So, if I'm talking to, Polygon, even Polygon Mumbai, or, any of these public networks, you'd like to know that, that wallet that I'm attempting to deploy it with, even though it's a lightweight operation, actually has the fuel inside of it. There's also a feature inside of Kaleido, again, another session where we'll, really decompose this, but there's a concept of a gas station where, a lot of companies, regulated industries, I'm sure there's folks on the call that fit into this bucket. You can't actually hold crypto, right? You really have use cases for these ecosystems, and you know that you're going to get value out of it, but you have a legal impediment that you can't have crypto. So Kaleido can act as sort of your treasury for that, right? And it's not we're not doing a tax on it. It's just a pass-through cost of your SaaS bill. So another nice convenient feature in addition to the sanity check right there. Okay, so let's go ahead and deploy this thing. And again, right, we'll see that pending, and then we'll see success right here. And we'll be able to dive into details about the transaction if we want, right? So this will take us into what we call Firefly right now, right? This takes us into the namespace where we can start seeing the actual blockchain operation, and then we can see events that we get out of the box for free from Firefly. I will go on and on about events, but I am of the opinion, as the Kaleido team is, that sometimes we make blockchain a bit too complicated, right? And sometimes we may put too much logic directly on the blockchain. It's really a system of coordination, and the more we can make this a message driven and an event driven system, the easier it is to integrate with backends and to maybe start doing more sophisticated stuff. So anyway, nice line of sight into sort of the blockchain transaction. What inputs were passed to it. It's just the binary that was passed into it. But you can go as low as you want into the world of Firefly to see those operations. You can stay as high as you want, just in terms of just show me that Ethereum transaction receipt or that transaction hash right there. So successful deployment, and now we probably want to start talking to the smart contract. So how would we do that? We can go back to our builds right here, right? Hop into this, and I'll create some APIs for it, right? So that I don't need to use an SDK, or I don't need to, get really good at low-level things like gas estimation and nonce management, right? So we can go into this guy right here. Again, same button, but now we're going to start doing some other stuff. So we're going to create that API endpoint, right? And this has always been my favorite feature of Kaleido, right? I don't come from a engineering or technical background. And as soon as, and this is also 5 years of maturity with this feature, as soon as this feature existed, right? It was once upon a time called ETH Connect. Just reading and digesting a smart contract became like so unintimidating and so straightforward, right? I can read 4 lines of JSON. I can read a function name, and that's sort of the idea, and the rationale behind this is we don't want impediments for any developer, right? Enterprise, non-enterprise, right? We'll call this Nick instead of Bob right there. And then we'll create those open APIs. And again, you'll see 2 core things in this API surface. You'll see the easy door in, right? Of just fire and forget a little JSON payload, right? Just make sure you have those, core parameters defined and, whatever the function actually requires. But you'll also see an easy door out, right? And that goes towards, what I was just pontificating about around events. And this is core to your system, right? This is kind of the beating heart of what you're doing on the blockchain. We marry this construct, business logic, smart contracts, and we talk about private key management. And we got our chain logic like more or less, complete. Yeah, maybe we want to Oracle something like Chainlink, right? Maybe we do want to mess around with one of the privacy modules on base 2. Okay, I know there's more things, but core operations you got to get right. Sign transactions properly, get those into the network deterministically, get events out of the network. And so we see that, this was a 721. So we see things like burn, approve, transfer, etc. But then we also see these listeners on top of here, right? And so the idea is that you create a listener object, right? I care about these signatures. I care about every time my colleague Kevin, transfers, a token, right? Or I care about every time, the deployer of the token, grants someone else a role. So you pick and choose, and you can always add more after the fact. what signatures you care about, then you bind those to a subscription. And the subscription is your definition of how you get data back to your application, to your backend. We support WebSockets and webhooks. And again, when we sort of, peel back the layers of the onion on, how to build an application, we'll talk more about, event listeners, subscriptions, and, how to consume those and park those in a database, or maybe even more interestingly, how to take an event and then go trigger another function, right? That's kind of the really exciting part of automating these multi-party flows. So any person, right? I could do this right now. Open up one of these. This is a exercisable API surface inside the platform right here. Just pass it. Not required. A lot of these parameters really just would be required right here, right? Just these two arguments. So yeah, I get excited about that one, but really, really powerful stuff right there. So let's continue on now that I think we've sort of touched on the smart contracts. And what you see here is that all of the source code, right, that we've pushed into the system just has an API interface for it. So really easy for you to just follow correct naming conventions. Name it whatever it correlates to in your business process flow. And then, your overall stack and overall automation suite becomes very, very clarified, unambiguous, very straightforward. Talked about those listeners, right? This is just an example of where they would live inside of the asset platform. So we can see those right here, right? Those are just defined. They have an ID, they have an object, and then those actually get married with, like I said, with a subscription right here. So we can see those, different subscriptions that are all transported via WebSockets. And then within them, they're either those contract specific signatures or they're Firefly specific signatures. Like, tell me if a contract deployment was successful, or just tell me if the blockchain operation was successful. And so you'll notice, right, as you start using Firefly, or start to get your hands on this asset platform surface, you get a ton of information for free, right? There's not a lot of heavy lifting that's really required out of you as a business admin or as a developer. You got to bring some source code if you don't want to use the 2721 1155 or whatever we park in there. You got to define what sort of events you want, but beyond those smart contract signatures, you'll get a rich trove of information for free just from Firefly. And so that's a lot of the heavy lifting, right? That can be has been a source of friction in the past with a lot of projects. And again, Kevin, Madison, please just if there's a pressing question, please just interrupt. So smart contract landing zone, I think we covered that pretty comprehensively. We can, we'll go through upgradable smart contracts and some of the more exotic things on a future webinar. Namespaces, I won't get to everything that we can click on today, but try to give you the broad tour. But wallets, I think that's a logical next one to come to right here. So let's jump into kind of the wallet space. Mentioned that there's a plethora of options right here. So we sort of span the gamut from let Kaleido custody the wallet for you and make a really easy and trivial integration with your existing LDAP OAuth system right here. Bunch of really neat features that I'll show you in just a second. But maybe you have a cloud estate, maybe you're AWS or an Azure shop, right? And you want to use Key Vault, or you want to use a HSM cluster. Also just as simple to provide a few reference IDs, right? Configuration IDs, give Kaleido permission to speak to that service on your behalf. And then those can get integrated. And so you start thinking about when you have a, sort of a multi-layered project with, different types of companies, different users, or maybe you're proxying access into the network for a user, right? We sort of call those the medium to long tail type users that, yeah, they want to participate in the application. And yes, they would like to know that their, signing utility and private key is truly theirs, right? But they don't need to run the whole stack of software, and they may not even want a blockchain node, right? You could help create a configuration on their behalf, and then we can get into roles and permissions to determine who can do what programmatically. And then what we've seen, in the financial services space and in some other industries is, a lot of affinity for multi-party compute and some of these other third-party providers. So imagine a lot of folks are familiar with Fireblocks. We have a, sort of custom integration to, make it very easy to just, use your existing Fireblocks wallet, define, which keys you want to use, and allow those to sign on Kaleido. There are some latency concessions you have to make, obviously, depending on, how many signatures you're requiring, but that's available. And then you can go as far as, running your own HashiCorp Vault server. We've open sourced a signing extension for it for the Ethereum curve. Or we can even help you integrate an existing HSM. So if it's PKCS 11 compliant, we can, help you create a custom plugin so that can communicate safely between, your firewall and, what we're calling the asset platform in Firefly here. We'll do a whole webinar on, the wallets, but I'll show you the HD wallets real quickly, and one of the really important features. So we'll call this, what's the date? 8/29 webinar. Okay, doesn't like underscore. This is the mnemonic, the seed phrase right here. You're welcome to copy that. So if you wanted to recreate this key tree off Kaleido, you'd have that same deterministic list of private keys. But what's really, really useful and convenient here, in addition to, remember, API to just automate clicking this button right here, is kind of the syntax that's available. And what I mean by syntax is, you have certain identifiers in your backend, right? UUIDs for, different users in your OAuth system, emails, things that you have stored that, represent a session for a user. You can use that same syntax right here inside of the key, right? I'll just type my name in, right? But, this could be any type of string that you need it to be. And then when the user is logged into your application, you just have an environment variable essentially, right? To, read in their login information. And you now know that key will map deterministically to that user. And this is more or less an endless key tree. There's over 2 billion available accounts inside of it, and they're all unique. And they're all deterministically recreatable. That's why saving that mnemonic is a pretty good practice. But the URI is really probably the most important thing. So, this instead of calling a smart contract, right? When I wanted to mint a token, for example, I don't have to pass in, this syntax right here. I can pass in the human readable URI, and the asset platform will map it down to the address and down to the private key. So wallets are oftentimes one of the trickiest things in this space, right? There's a large percentage that I'll just label as Web3 illiterate, right? Where, a MetaMask or, a hardware wallet or private key management is just, it's gonna, be a granite barrier to your project, right? Companies tend to want to focus on user experience and stickiness of the application and providing value and fun and, sort of being able to upsell and keep people in their community, blah, blah, blah. Forcing them to get like super sophisticated in blockchain. And I know a lot of people are, don't believe MetaMask is sophisticated, but, for a large swath of users, that's kind of a deal breaker. So what this does is, they don't even know that a private key is there, for example, right? You can just abstract all that complexity and you can expose as much or as little of the blockchain as you want. And, again, the coding, your server-side coding is really straightforward because, they logged into your app and you automatically know what URI to call on their behalf. Maybe they logged into the app and they don't have a key. So you just automate, calling the API and making them a key right here. Okay, so again, we'll do a whole session on key management, on best practices and sort of considerations of, third parties, HSMs, cloud integrations, HD wallets, or even externally owned accounts. But the keys are clearly, like about the most important thing, right, in this whole world, right? The dude, where's my key question. So we, take a lot of pride in giving you these options, but also giving you this, really friendly syntax to call. And that applies to all these, by the way, not just HD wallets. So those are the keys. And let's hop out and see what's next. Okay, I'll jump into the NFTs and we'll do a sort of a lightweight walkthrough. And then maybe let's look at the blockchains first, and then we'll do the NFTs. So I did mention that, we can connect to any Kaleido blockchain and it will auto detect your infrastructure under the covers. It does that with, an organizational API key, right? Think of a bearer token that can, call your admin API surface. So it's just scraping a query for, what you have in your organization. So if I said connect to a Kaleido managed blockchain, it'd say, hey, here's all the stuff that you have. It's Quorum, it's Besu, it's, Fabric, for example, right? But if you want to go out into the wild or, talk to one of the test nets, for example, it's not a lot of heavy lifting whatsoever, right? Give it a name, arbitrary. These are the two that are the most important, right? The endpoint that you're hooking into for that node and the chain ID. If you're working with sort of an enterprise RPC provider, or you're working with Kaleido, for example, it will have boundary security on it. So you'll need to pass the correct token or the correct basic auth username password combo right there. So also worth mentioning, we support connectivity to these public ecosystems, but we also run infrastructure, right? So if you need a supernet, if you need a subnet, if you need an Ethereum enterprise RPC connection, Kaleido can do that for you as well, right? So another example of minimizing vendors and sort of consolidating your stack into one place. So yeah, I'll leave it at that. We'll get way more into detail about sort of setting configurations and setting like block confirmation times and setting how you want the gas to be paid, slow, medium, fast, etc. But I think for this call, I don't want to go too deep down the rabbit hole of because that's really where a lot of the complexity comes in, and sort of custom configurations come in. So instead, let's take a peek at the NFTs right here. And this is a really, really fun feature that's available. So as I mentioned, think of this as sort of your playground to test and define the DNA and the metadata and the structure of your NFT. And this can be as straightforward as just picking an image, a static image, or this could pull out video files, or call an API that goes to your backend or goes to a third party, right, to retrieve information, retrieve data, objects, etc. We'll do a pretty vanilla one today for you, just so it's not filled with YAML and all sorts of configurations. So you create a template and then you create a collection against that definition. So pretty logical relationship right there. If you get your hands on this and want to see some example templates, we have those documented, and we'll just like the smart contract engine that we looked at with those Lego blocks, we'll continue to add more and more examples as certain standards harden and manifest, and as you guys and as the market tells us what type of NFTs are being used. I have a simple image one that's in my editor somewhere, so I'll just copy this guy right here and just go ahead and paste that. So you can parse it as a sanity check, and then based on the attributes that you've given it, right, of like what you want it to have. I want it to have a description, I want it to have an external URL, and I want it to require a file for that static image right there. This is not even getting close to touching the blockchain anywhere inside of this world right here, right? We're trying to make sure that this NFT is going to behave the way that we want it to behave, right? So we'll say, I don't know, 829 demo again. Doesn't matter, 829 demo, and then give me an image, right? Give me something. And what you'll notice is that you can automate whatever images you want inside of the system right here. So you can on demand, right, push an image up, or before the fact, you can kind of preload your off-chain portion of the Firefly namespace of the asset platform with whatever images that you want. I did an Angry Bird earlier. We'll do I don't know, we'll do this guy right here, some static picture. And again, right, this can be as interesting or as uninteresting as you want it to be, but this is, to me, this is very powerful, right? This sort of try it out feature. Is this thing going to render properly? Is that API call going to actually work? Is that video going to stream, right? The more sophisticated you get with the NFT, the more important this, sort of, I guess, think of it like truffle, right? I want to make sure the unit test passed for, the efficacy of my NFT. It works. I'm happy with it. It's just going to be simple images. So, go ahead and create that template right there, right? Oh, I got to give it a different name. Sorry. So create that template right there, and now we got a new guy, simple image demo. But you can also see that the I use the term brain, right, for Firefly and for, you know, a lot of this stack because, you know, that's a pretty logical example, but it helps you stay out of jail, right, in terms of, you know, duplicating things or, you know, signing stuff with the wrong key or, you know, any of the, you know, sort of low hanging fruit that would, you know, sort of, again, act as more friction inside of your project. So we have a collection, or we have a template, excuse me, and now we can, you know, create a collection against it, right? So we can say, hey, I want to create a collection. I need to give it a name. I need to give it a token pool, which I haven't done. So I would have to go back and do this. And then it would just want that same metadata. For example, it would want to know, like, you know, where's the interesting thing that I'm creating the collection against right here. Once you have a collection, you just start minting NFTs against it, right? So we have one called NFTs right here, and you know, I could go in there and I could just create an NFT if I wanted, right? It's just going to ask me for, you know, some of that simple information that, you know, we already walked through. I want to know the name. I want to know, you know, the attributes that it has. That's it, right? And again, I'll reiterate, API for everything right here. So incredibly straightforward. This feature may be the most important of all the features, right? And it seems almost like, you know, innocuous, right? It's just another field that I have to fill in. But I spent a little time talking about the syntax, right, of that, you know, of the key management and like, hey, John Doe is logged into the application, right? This is closing that loop right here where, you know, I don't need to mint something on demand. I need to assign this NFT to a specific user. They're going to go into their wallet. Your application code is going to call the API surface and say, hey, has anything been allocated to this user right here? And it'll say yes, or it'll be empty, right? And then they, right, will have the ability to mint that NFT or claim that NFT, right? Creating the same experience, right, as it would be if they really did own that private key. Also, there's flexibility. So you can take the completely custodied option of like, you know, let them claim it and mint it, and, you know, it's going to be, you know, owned by the private key on the server side. Or when they claim it, they can claim it into a MetaMask wallet, right? Or after the fact, they can transfer it to a MetaMask wallet. So you start seeing the ability to create these projects. And I have an app, right, that'll give you an idea of like how you code against that surface right there, and, you know, sort of, you know, create that same idea. But that's really kind of the point that we're hoping to get across here of like, you know, there isn't a one size fits all. There's a really, really elegant, easy path of, you know, I just want to take care of, you know, 99% of my users. I want to build just absolutely beautiful UI, UX. But then maybe I do have that 1.5% of, you know, quasi savvy, you know, Web3 users that, you know, had purchased Bitcoin, right, 8 years ago, and, you know, wouldn't even discuss letting someone else, you know, hold their private key. Got to make them happy too. So this makes everyone happy with this approach. And, you know, you're a retail and entertainment company, you're a supply chain company, right? And you're modeling digital twins for your assets. You realize, right, as we look at this API, how as soon as you have new information in your backend, I have a new design artifact, for example, or I have a new allocation of copper or diamonds or coal or, you know, whatever is being pulled out of the ground right here. You go down to this NFT section and you just start creating like additional templates, right? So that you know, just automate the DNA, right? I'll use that word again, the composition of it. And there's no limit on how many NFTs you can have, right? You can have hundreds, thousands of templates and corresponding collections right here. So it turns into truly, you know, your own framework for however you want this to work. And again, we will spend an entire webinar sort of talking through this, like with tactical detail of call this API, call this specific route. This is the body right here. This is the payload you expect to get back, et cetera. And during that webinar, what we'll do is we'll take you through an actual application experience that's been built, you know, against, you know, this entire expansive API surface. So, you know, we'll show you how it would look to, you know, be an administrator and create a new collection, right? Maybe you don't want to, you know, do it in the asset platform API. Maybe you want to do it in your own custom admin API, no problem, right? Maybe you want to start talking about delivery versus payment flows and, you know, stuff beyond NFTs. We'll take you through that journey and sort of, you know, help decompose and demystify, I think, like how hard it is to, you know, do some of these ostensibly quite complicated things. I'm not going to spoil the show on this. This is a really slick, beautiful app that, kind of got a revamp or a refresh. But we can see that, it's just really simple to kind of, visualize NFTs that you've minted. These are the two we just saw on the platform, for example, right? So if we go back here, here's our two friends, go to the app, they're hanging out in there. And then similarly, right, let's just click on one right here. I'll give you the final preview. If I allocated this to user one, and then I came into an app and I logged in as user one, this guy is going to be available for me, and I'm going to see a button that says claim, or I'm going to see, it'll say claim, and what wallet do you want to claim it into? And so that's where you integrate kind of the externally owned account scenario as well. So that's the teaser for an upcoming webinar. And NFTs are awesome, straightforward, right? I think to an extent. Other things like delivery versus payment, though, and using escrow smart contracts and fractionalizing an NFT into fungible currency, some of those workflows can be a bit more complicated. So, we'll take you through that and sort of talk about maybe there's a different way to exchange messaging and logic versus just using a smart contract. So that could be of interest to I'm sure it's of interest to a lot of folks, but anyone in the multi-party or enterprise space, that'll be a good demonstration and a nice new paradigm to talk about. What else? Just high-level features that are in here. Again, we'll go deep in all these. Block Explorer out of the box. So this can be white labeled for your business or your company. So it helps get you this Etherscan, Block Scout, right? Like it's very similar to a lot of those out in the wild, but it's yours, right? And it's yours for a private chain, it's yours for a side chain, it's yours for a public chain. And again, white labelable API sitting underneath this as well. So you want to start creating audit trails, or you want to start seeing, I want to know everything that this specific address did, right? I want to know every time he did something on this specific smart contract. Customize your own APIs and your own features. And then one final tease, actually, when we do show the app and we start, creating and moving assets, the app will also show you exercising this API along with those token pool APIs and showing you the life cycle of an asset. So it's really valuable in so many ways, right? Just for a user to visualize it, all the way to an auditor or regulator to visualize it. It's a big boy stack, right? There's a lot of stuff running under the covers, so fully monitored, with the rich Grafana dashboards. So you can see the health of your chain, but you can also see the health of the different runtimes and the different containers that are being exercised right here, health of the database that's inside of there. And based on, what you need to see, what information, is interesting, or maybe like can create a trigger for your backend, also completely customizable. So Block Explorer and the monitoring, not the important, for technical perspective, probably not the most interesting thing to, go on and on about. So I'll leave it at that for those. Last thing I want to do, try to cut this off with 5 minutes, just in case there's any questions. Last thing I want to do is just reiterate that the API surface is not just the asset platform, right? If we go back to this picture, it also is Firefly, right? And so Firefly in and of itself has a bunch of configurations you can do, right? That's where the events and the subscriptions really sort of get parked, right? That's where, the integrations to your OAuth systems happen. That's where, this is what I'll spend time on, this is where the bilateral private or public messaging takes place. Public wouldn't be bilateral, but the sort of point-to-point or org-to-org, privacy groups and off-chain messaging, that really becomes kind of the beating heart of a lot of the solutions. And, that's what I was alluding to when I started talking about delivery versus payment, or, ways to do business logic other than just in Solidity or in smart contract code. And one nice feature, right? Firefly is open source, so you'll see a lot of similarities here, but one really nice feature that exists inside of the asset platform is not only to hop over to Remix and do a sanity check of your smart contract code, but also to get into the sandbox and kind of have a facsimile of an application out of the box available to you, right? So again, you can have a bunch of namespaces inside of this world. So whichever one you want to toy around with, just pick the appropriate one. And then based on the configs that it has, you'll see the ability to do messages if it's multi-party. If you, tokens and contracts will always be there, but this is the delta. And this is what I'd encourage folks to, maybe experiment with, right? Not directly through here, but at least in Firefly open source in general. Just the concept of, broadcasting a message and seeing, how it gets pinned onto the blockchain, and also sending a private message, right? I'll try this. I didn't do a sanity check of this earlier, but let's just give it a go. We'll say demo right here. So this is, sort of gives you that TypeScript code right here. And, you can see the API that gets called. You can see the event that gets ingested right here via the WebSocket. But this is kind of the interesting thing, right? This would be the area to focus on if you're a bit new to Firefly and a bit new to not doing everything directly inside of a smart contract function. There's proofs that Firefly gives you for free of the fact that, this was the deterministic payload of, whatever I typed test right here, right? And, this is, the block that it went into, right? And so it'll pin proofs of that without leaking information. And that becomes really critical if we go down a level right here, we start thinking about private messages, right? And so, rather than worrying about, I got to use Tessera for this, or, I got to come up with some clever way to, do innocuous metadata, but still put hashes on the blockchain, for example. Those approaches do work to an extent. This is just way more elegant, where you can define who you want that private message to go to. You can give it tags and topics so that they can consume it, right, in a more informed fashion. And then again, that sort of batch pin operation will happen on the blockchain, and it has an enormous amount of entropy inside of it, right? It has privacy group identifiers. It has nonce management or sequencing of how many transactions did I send in this privacy group on this tag or on this topic right here. And then it has the hash of the payload in addition to a timestamp and some other stuff. And all of that gets sort of bundled, passed through the algorithm to create, a hash, right? It's a hash of a lot of hashes essentially at the end of the day. So it is indiscernible to anyone that's not, a recipient of it, but it's also quite easy to recreate if you were a recipient. And there's sign verify logic and acknowledgements that happen too. So the idea would be, let's use that as our workflow right here. We know we're getting protection from the blockchain for the fact that, I sent this, so-and-so received this right here, payload hasn't changed. And now you can run an event listener, right, against, this private off-chain portion of the stack. And you can say, hey, when I get a message with this tag and this topic, go do process X, right? On and on and on. So just a really extensible and, sort of dynamic paradigm where, if you need to, redefine logic, you don't have to redeploy a smart contract. You just update your JavaScript a little bit. And then there's protections inside of here too. So, if we want to send JSON back and forth, which is quite common, maybe we want everyone to, let's make sure everyone's using, sort of the exact same schema right here. And, these fields are non-negotiable, absolutely required right here. And then you get that protection again, right? Another example, the system will tell you, hey, you didn't follow the rules for this message right here. I can't send it. And anyone can define a data type. So you define it, that's actually a broadcast transaction. So everyone gets it. And they say, oh, Acme organization said, for bags of wheat and flour, we need to conform to this, right? I'm a purchaser of that, and I say, okay, no problem, I'll do that. So again, and a record of that on the blockchain as well, right? Just for assurances. So I'd encourage folks to just, poke around inside of here, right? This is an awesome little playground, maybe before you go as far as building an app. Gives you stuff around tokens, right? You can index those, you can mint them, transfer them, burn them, and then you can push some of your source code up and sort of, get an idea of like, what Kaleido has built on top of this API surface. Last thing I'll show out, just because it triggered my memory there, is this notion of token pools right here. So there'll be a webinar again, I keep repeating this, but there'll be one where we really focus on NFTs and, maybe a combination of fungible, non-fungible, tokens in the same use case. But what's really nice is, I haven't done a ton of transfers here, but what's really nice is you just tell the system, hey, I care about this contract. I care about it from block X, right? Could be when it was deployed, could be when you got your first asset, for example, and it will index everything that's happened. So you'll see balances, you'll see transfers, and that's what I meant by sort of, this functionality married with that Block Explorer API can really give you, as much granularity and as many details as you could possibly want. So I did promise I'd leave 5 minutes. I left 3, but that's pretty good for me. So I'll stop sharing and see if there's anything in the chat. Kevin, Madison, anything? Okay, great. Yeah, so maybe I have a slide of how you can get in touch with us. I'm not sure if I do. But maybe Madison, Kevin, you can just throw sales@kaleido.io into the message. You can throw my email into there. Just go to kaleido.io. There's a bot on the website. The email address is sales, marketing, any alias you can think of probably comes to us. Just reach out. We'd love to talk to you. It can be technical, it can be business oriented, it can be commercial, whatever makes sense. We're incredibly flexible. We love the technology, as I hope that, sort of came across. And, we want to see your project succeed. So this series will continue, probably be me a couple more times, but you'll get to see some other faces and some other engineers and, likely even hear from some executives, right, about, what made projects really work. And, I use the word friction a few times. What's another source of friction? So big thanks to everyone. Please join us in the future. Webinars recorded. We'll kick it back to you. It's on YouTube. And yeah, don't be shy. Reach out to us if there's anything we can do to help. So many thanks. Have a lovely remainder of your Tuesday.